Okay, I'm just waiting for notification of that to appear on the screen. Okay, the meeting is now recording, so I will begin by taking the sederant for the Clydesdale Area Committee on Tuesday the 15th of February 2022. Do we have Councillor Allison? No, I have apologies from Councillor Corbett. I can see that we have Councillor Greenshields, Councillor Hamilton. I have apologies from Councillor Holford. I can see that we have Councillor Horsham, Councillor Lockhart, Councillor Logan. I have apologies from Councillor McCallan. And we have Councillor McClymont, Councillor McGavigan, Councillor Mars and Councillor Shearer. Officers in attendance today are Jacqueline Wallace, Jonathan Reid, Colin Park, Lynn Wiley and myself, Carol Lyon. I'll hand over to yourself now, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, Carol. Well, welcome to everybody. 5 years down the track now, or almost 5 years down the track. It's been an interesting 5 years, and thank you all for coming and welcome to the last Clydesdale Area Committee meeting. Right, off we go then. The first thing is the usual declaration of interests. Has anyone got any declarations? Bearing in mind at some stage we've got the grants. Anyone got any declarations for them? No? Good. Right. Then we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. And that was 16th of November, and we need to approve them. Has anyone got any points on that at all? No, in which case I propose them.
Agree, Chair.
Thank you. And then we move on to the various items for noting. We've got on to 3 different presentations, so we'll take them in order. And the first one is participatory budgeting education resources, and that's the People Equity Funding, or PEF. And therefore, we will set off with that, and I'm just scrolling down to the right bit. There we go. We've got Brain's gone. Who's doing that one? I can't see you on the screen. You've got
Jacqueline Wallace, Chair.
Ah, yes, that's right. Right, well, you have the floor. On you go.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to come along today to speak with you about participatory budgeting across Clydesdale. I will give apologies firstly for Laura Mitchell, who is our lead officer in terms of participatory budgeting, or PB, as I will affectionately call it going forward, if that's all right with everyone. Laura is on annual leave today, so I'm delivering the report, but I believe she was at pre-agenda, so hopefully any questions specific to her have maybe been addressed. But my name is Jacqueline Wallace. I am the Quality Improvement Manager, and I do oversee all the equity work within education and the Curriculum Quality Improvement Service. So hopefully that today will be an opportunity for you to hear a wee bit more about progress within PB. So participatory budgeting is progressing well in our schools, and want to now have the opportunity to hopefully share with you possibly the best bit about the process so far, and it's more about the outputs in terms of what has really been achieved for the children and young people in real terms across our schools. You'll have been aware of the consultation process we've had, which has been very full and robust, and the voting process that has been part of that also. So following that consultation and voting, we're now able to provide you with some case studies on the process today. The only part that's missing at the moment is the final impact, because clearly we still have to establish that once our schools have finalised the process. But we have provided with you today with 3 case studies. We could have picked many schools to share that practice with you, but it's just that some schools are slightly further down the line in terms of their process at the moment and more ready to share. So we have just picked 3, and we've tried to give a balance of case studies that would show you some information across our primary schools, secondary and ASN, and hopefully they give you a flavour of what is happening. You will see we have provided one from Victoria Park, which clearly focuses on health and wellbeing and really enhancing and enriching the learning experiences for the young people within Victoria Park, and looking at particular play and leisure-based activity. And again, all the detail is on that, so I don't want to repeat it for you, but hopefully, as I say, that's giving you a real flavour of what participatory budget can do in terms of really direct funding to impact for the young people. Same with Rigside Primary School. They were looking at their playground resources to enhance opportunities there, which again clearly focuses on the well-being of all the children within the school, as well as building resilience and, you know, making friendships. And I think one thing we'd see here as well, we're aware that many of the PB spend could be termed universal spends, but we're very clear, and you'll see that particularly from Rig's side, that the most important thing then is about tracking the individuals most directly affected by poverty. So although it may seem like a universal spend, we're very clear in terms of our own process that those are the children that should be tracked in terms of impact. So Rig's side is a very good example of that. Lanark Grammar is one that we've included also, and again this is about water fountains and reusable water bottles. So clearly, you know, something that there's been a need within the school in line with their cost to the school day policy and the work they want to do is to support there, as well as the sustainability agenda. So another great project, and we look forward to hearing more about the impact of the three of them as time progresses. But we can clearly see, as we said, a robust process has been in place with many votes being cast and consultation process, and everybody being involved in the process, which is what this is really all about. We are coming up to the deadline now in terms of timing for the end of spend for the end of March. So we're working closely with our schools to make sure they still feel supported, to discuss any challenges or issues with them in terms of that spend, because it's important we do have it for the end of the financial year. We're also keen at this point in time for our next steps to be about how do we progress from here. This has been a fairly new process, as you know, over this last year for education resources and for schools. So we do need to see what has worked well, and what do we potentially need to change. So we do have some consultation work that will be going on at the end of February to work with our schools, and that will hopefully inform our progress as we move forward into next year. But we do think we're in a good place. We've actually had the opportunity recently to share our work with East Renfrewshire Council, who actually haven't started their journey yet at all. So I think that's just testament to the work that we're doing in South Lanarkshire and how we have, you know, since last May, we've been consulting with our schools, and now the fact that we're actually getting to the final outcome in terms of the children and young people in the spend is positive, and we'll be able to build on this good practice going into next year. So today, as I say, was really that opportunity to share the good practice. Not happy to take any questions in any of that. With then, as you know, we will have an opportunity to pull everything together to do a final report once we come to the end of the spend. But at the moment, it is really just building on what we have already done. I wanted to share that with you, particularly with our Clydesdale schools, to give you a flavour of what's been going on. So thank you for your time and listening today. Thank you.
Have you got any questions? I can't actually see any hands on my screen at the moment. No, I can see no hands there. I guess that do I move that report? I'll move that. Oh, Catherine, she's got a question. And then David Shearer after that.
It's not so much a question, but I really like some of those projects. In particular, I like the one from my ward, of course, the Lanark Grammar. I think that's a really good idea to do the water bottles. So thanks for letting us know what was done with the money. Thank you.
Right, David, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Jackie, I take it that this was available to all the primaries, and you've just highlighted some of the achievements. So it wasn't just these primaries in the high school that was involved, it was everyone, but these are the highlights, yes? Is that correct?
Yes, indeed, absolutely. Yeah, just the schools that were perhaps in that position to be ready to share in terms of timelines for committee, but absolutely the good practice is going on across almost all of our schools, all the schools that receive PEF, which is just almost all of our schools across South Lanarkshire. So yes, absolutely, and I'm sure the schools will be happy to share more just once they come to that point where they're ready to share. Not a problem.
And great to see Victoria Park being fully involved. I know Eileen and myself and Lindsay, it's a dear wee school to all of us in our ward, so we're very protective of Victoria Park. Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay, has anybody got anything else? I can't. Eileen, you got your hand up.
Just quickly, I know that when you go to the Killook High School parent council, meetings, we continually discuss participatory budget scheme. So I'm assuming that what will be happening, I think I heard you saying that some are more advanced than others, and some will still be doing preparatory work. Did I pick that up right?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, most should be slightly further down than that, Councillor Logan, but there will be, we would always encourage to share in terms of any parent council meetings. We would be encouraging the school to share that with you in terms of progress, as well as their wider parent carer body. But they should, everybody has had their voting process now, everybody's had their full consultation, and do know now what they are spending the money on. But in terms of how far they are down the road with that spend, some are slightly further than others. So that's why we can give a bit more information with these schools, and obviously that impact that will come. So we are keen to be able to share that with you at a later date if at all possible also.
Yeah, that's fine. They're excellent at telling you exactly. They've been very, very thorough in actual fact, and they've been very thorough in trying to engage with not just the usual people that would turn up, and they really went an extra mile to try and bring in maybe parents and pupils who wouldn't normally engage. So it has been an excellent thing. It's just, I wondered if just some were, taking their time a wee bit to make sure that what they wanted was done or whatever. But no, they keep us totally up to date, and they've worked very, very hard. I've been very pleased at what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. That's good to hear. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right, I can see no other hands up. Yes, thank you, Jacqueline. I mean, it is obviously, it's going great guns now. Glad to see it. I've got nothing more, and if you don't want to enjoy the pleasure of the rest of the meeting, Jacqueline, you are quite entitled to go now, and thank you very much for your report and everything else, okay?
Thank you, Chair. That's great. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Good. Now we move on then. Do I need to propose that? I don't think I do. It's just a report, really, isn't it?
Yeah, Chair, if we could just agree to note it.
I think we're all agreed. Thank you.
We're all agreed. Good. Excellent. Right, moving on then to another part of participatory budgeting, and that's housing and technical resources. And we've now got Jonathan. I think it's Jonathan who's still with us, is he? To do it, or has he been replaced? No, Jonathan, you're here. Good.
Not replaced yet, thankfully.
No, just I can't see you. You're off screen to me. You're back on screen now. Okay, thank you. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing us to come along and provide an update in terms of what we're doing within housing and technical resources in relation to PB. I will just call it PB instead of trying to attempt the longer version. Okay, so we, at the start of the year, put forward 3 different budget areas within the resource that we thought would be suitable for the PB approach. They are the Housing Investment Programme environmental aspect of it, the estate improvement budget, and one within the community safety budget as well, particular aspect of that. So looking to present an update to you in relation to 2 of those today. So that's the environmental programme within the Housing Investment Programme, and also the estate improvement budget as well. So the pro forma that's been included in your packs is obviously developed by Finance and Corporate Resources, but it gives you a flavour in terms of the project overview itself, a little bit about the budget area that it's come from, and then details of the outcomes of that as well. So we're presenting 2 projects to you today. First of which is the Kirkton Court Sheltered Housing Complex upgrade. So this was part of the Housing Investment Programme. So this is a big internal upgrade that takes place in the sheltered housing complex. And it lends itself very well to a PB approach in that we have residents there that are able to simply select their preferences in terms of the design, in terms of the furnishing, the colour schemes, all those kind of things within the complex. And we are able to then act on that and give them the desired outcome as well. So what happens is we have officers who will make contact with all residents, provide them with 2 or 3, in most cases 3 different colour schemes and options and furniture styles and everything like that. And we allow them to simply vote on the process that they'd like to see. And we try and get as engagement from across as many residents as possible. And then we follow that right the way through and do a survey at the end as well and see how they like to comment on the work that's been done, and most of the results come back with that as very favourable. The second project then that I'd like to talk to you today about is the installation of a new fence at Honeybank Crescent, Carluke. This is taking place within the estate improvement budget. So this is a smaller budget. It's only £40,000 for the whole of South Lanarkshire, and that's divvied up £10,000 to each division, each of the 4 housing divisions. Now, the Clydesdale division, the £10,000 they had, they determined that residents at Honeybank Crescent were crying out for a new fence to be installed in that particular area. So rather than just simply install one, officers then worked with residents and said, what are the issues? What would you like to see? What do you think would be able to fix those particular issues? And again, a vote took place and residents picked what their preferred option would be on the variety of styles of fence that were available, and ultimately ended up with the one that got the most votes. So both of these projects now completed. As I say, there was a fairly substantial improvement works done at Kirkton Court with about £250,000 spent on that. There's recognised, however, that not all of that would go on things that people had a decision on. Some of that was internal, sort of electrical wiring, those kind of things. But the majority of that would have been available for residents to determine how that money was spent and picking their preferred option. And then the fenced installation at Honeybank Crescent as well. Slightly smaller numbers in terms of only 11 households took part in that, but 90% of them selected the preferred result, and almost all of the £10,000 allocation was spent on that as well. So we'll continue to take forward opportunities within all the different budget areas that we've committed to a PBE approach, to work with residents, with tenants, with other customers, to try and allow them to pick what the end results are. And as I say, we'll come back to this committee at a later date next year, when we have some more projects to report on as well. I'm happy to take any questions from any members just now.
Great, many thanks, Jonathan. Good to see Carluke is getting a bit of attention there as well. Nice to see that. Okay, I have got no hands up at the moment. Has anyone got any questions? No, have I missed anything? No, I haven't. Right, well, Jonathan, thank you very much. That's great stuff. I think that, again, you can go if you'd like to, unless you want to stay, and we'd like to thank you for the report. And I think, are we all agreed that we accept that?
Agreed.
Good. Okay, Jonathan, thanks a lot. Then we'll release you and we'll move on to Colin Park now, who is patiently waiting, and we're now going to talk about the residence parking permit zones consultation. So, Colin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for having me along today. So this is a short paper to provide the Area Committee with the results of the completed residence parking permit zones consultation. And that's to inform the committee's recommendation to the future executive committee. And just for members' benefit, we are looking at taking a paper to the 2nd of March executive committee on this item. Section 3 sets out the background to RPPZs, and paragraph 3.5, you'll note at the full council meeting of the 22nd of September, there was a motion put forward relating to parking permit charges. And it was subsequently agreed that consultation would be undertaken with residents living in the current RPPZs across South Lanarkshire. Within Clydesdale, just for information, it's at 4.1. We only have a small resident parking permit zone in Carluke, and this is the third area committee we've came to. We've also already went to Rutherglen Cambuslang, and we've also went to East Kilbride. So following the 22nd of September, charging for permits was put on hold pending the outcome of this consultation exercise, and this report sets out the results. Section 4 notes the detail of the consultation, the numbers issued to the various areas across South Lanarkshire, and appendices 5, section 5 and appendices 1 and 2 set out the results in a bit more detail. Paragraph 5 notes that 4,286 households were consulted, and as of a few days after the close of the consultation, we had received 1,365 completed returns, which represented an overall return rate of 32%. Paragraph 5.2 notes that consultation of this nature returns typically run between 5 and 30%. So given we had a reply rate of around about 32%, this is obviously at the higher end of the scale, and it basically indicates a good connection between the council and our residents and a general wide interest in the survey content. Overall, 81% of households chose to pay the £5 per year administration charge, which equates to £10 over 2 years, and to remain part of the residence parking permit zone. Conversely, 19% wish to have their zone removed. Overall, that's the same bit I'm going through again. So can I turn into the recommendation? Committee is asked to note the results of the survey. Clearly the impact in the Clydesdale area is less than elsewhere, but note the content and discuss the contents of the report. And importantly, you have to provide a recommendation for consideration by a future executive committee. So what I'm doing, I'm taking the recommendations from Rutherglen and Cambuslang, East Kilbride, obviously Clydesdale today and Hamilton tomorrow, and that's going into very largely a similar paper for the executive to consider in early March. Back over to you, Chair. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Colin. Well spotted, Lindsay. Yes, thanks for that. And Lindsay, you've got your hand up.
Thanks very much, Richard. There's a few things that I'd like to know, Colin, before we have a discussion, because I think that it'd be more useful if there's more information in this paper, to be honest. But I take it the parking zones is the ones behind the High Street in Carluke.
Yeah, I've actually got information. I'm going to say, if you just
Rankin.
Rankin. I'm going to say, I have this up on my screen somewhere. I'm going to say Castles, Rankin. Does that make sense? Probably.
Yeah. So, how much do the people currently pay for their parking permits just now in these areas? Is it the same as elsewhere in South Lanarkshire? And also a bit more information about the survey. How many people from Carluke answered the survey, and what was their preferred choice from that answer, if you have that breakdown?
Okay, I'll just kind of point you the direction of the report, which kind of has all that information.
All right, okay.
In terms of what they pay at present, no one is paying anything at present. So what happened is obviously £10 on the back of work that Councillor Mars chaired via the Road Safety Forum a number of years ago. There was a review done in relation to residence parking permit zones and whether they were a good tool for us to look at expanding. The work of that group confirmed that they were, and at that time, to be fair, the Road Safety Forum group considered that the time was appropriate, and that was a cross-party group. The time was appropriate for a charge to be introduced, and we looked at a whole series of options, and we settled on £10 over 2 years. That was considered as part of the 2021 budget setting exercise and was not taken. It was then subsequently considered as part of the 21-22 budget setting exercise, and it was taken. At the start of this financial year, we, as a road service, as a parking unit, started to introduce that charge. To be fair, the numbers that were affected in this particular cycle of the year were minimal. I think it's only some areas out in Cambuslang that we'd already implemented a £10 charge. That obviously generated a little bit of debate and discussion across the various parties, and that's what then went to the September Exec Committee. So at this moment in time, whilst at the start of the year there was a £10 charge approved, it has not currently been implemented pending the results of this survey. In terms of Carluke, those areas that you talked about there, we're entirely right. Castles, Rankin, there's a few other areas in and around the town centre. They're not paying anything at all. You see it, paragraph 4.1, letters were issued to 4,286 households. And you see at the second bullet point, Carluke made up 169 of them. So whilst important and clearly, an essential residence parking zone for the immediate area around Carluke, it's obviously not on the scale of, for example, East Kilbride, which is just under 2,300, and Hamilton, which is 932. Both East Kilbride and Hamilton were largely developed and introduced on the back of charges that were brought in the late 90s. So town centre charges were brought in, pushed vehicles out into kind of neighbouring areas. In terms of returns, and from Carluke, we had 21% of people replied, so 21% of 169. And in terms of what they voted for, 86%, this is shown in Appendix 2, 86% of those that returned wanted to pay and keep the zone, and 14% of them wished to remove the zone. The report goes into a wee bit more detail in terms of the sub-zones in East Kilbride, just given the kind of scale of them. But hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just to clarify, like, so see how in East Kilbride, like, obviously I don't know East Kilbride very well, but the residential parking zones in East Kilbride, is it a similar setup to Curluke, or is it actual, like, just houses? Because obviously in Curluke it's the town centre. So is it round the village that
in East
a lot of them are?
In East Kilbride, there's a mixture, Councillor. There's what I would term has been a largely residential area. So, for example, Murray and East Kilbride, 99.9% are residential. Going to the other extreme, and you get kind of the village, which is a mixture of residential, some businesses, some properties as well. So, again, different dynamics. The village itself is possibly more comparable to some of Curluke. I'm not comparing them directly, but it's kind of similar issues, and issues keeping parking free, keeping servicing bays free. But it's largely the same principle. And as over the years, as I said, East Kilbride and Hamilton were the core. Pressures began to get developed in Rutherglen and Turner Uddingston as well, clearly Curluke and Cambuslang. So what had happened, and again, Councillor Mars knows about this, was a decision taken in 2010 because of cost pressures, etc. We chose not to implement any new residence parking permit zones. That became a bit of an unsustainable position because, quite rightly, some members were writing into us about other locations, Lark Hall being one, where people were wanting residence parking permit zones, and at the time we weren't introducing them because we couldn't afford them, to be blunt. So now the position is, we're now seeing, it's been confirmed that we do wish to expand and explore new residence parking permit zones, and there's a list that was attached to the paper that I think went to 2020. I'm sorry, I've lost track of the last 2 years. I went to a committee recently in terms of the ones we were going to look at. We've not managed to get through them because of COVID and other pressures, but we are looking at programming them in the coming months. Thanks, Chair.
Well, okay, thanks. Next was Catherine. You had your hand up, and then Eileen after that.
Thanks, Chair. No, it was just, I just think that the consultation was pretty poor, because you had a choice, either paying for it or not having it at all. And if you've already got it and you need it for the likes of Curluke Town Centre, most people obviously had to go for it. Maybe the people who didn't go for it didn't have a car, so they weren't really fussed either way, to be honest. And I don't really understand, and I don't want to advocate a higher fee, but I don't understand how £10 over 2 years is going to bring any very much money into the council. I think the administration would be more than that, to be honest. And you're not going to chase people for £10, I wouldn't think either, because I know the debtor section don't normally chase people for that amount of money. So do they not get a permit if they don't pay? Is that how it's going to work?
Chair, if I can come in there on the back of that point, just kind of picking up some of them. Your last point first, Councillor McClyman. Yes, we'll implement this charge. Essentially, we write out to say your penalty, your parking permit's due for renewal. Put in a wee bit of context that we've now introducing a charge. They'll have to apply for how many permits they wish, and we would only issue them if they paid. If we go through, have a discussion today, have a discussion tomorrow, and the executive confirms that the charge is to be reinstated. So yes, that would be the case. In terms of the cost, what this will do, we have, let's get my figures right, we've got 4,286. £10 will bring in about 44,000 over a two-year period. It costs of that order to issue permits. Councillor Mars, again, sorry just for kind of picking on you, but you'll remember that's what we looked at. So we looked at a whole number of options back in 2019 where, again, to be open and honest about it, we looked at, do we just cover the cost? Do we just kind of cover the cost and that's it? Do we introduce a greater charge to perhaps cover the cost but allow some additional income that would allow us to easily expand into other areas or assist with the running of the service? And to be honest, we'll benchmark with some other neighbouring authorities who were charging some significant amount of money for parking permit charges. Now, clearly, some of them were like Edinburgh and Glasgow, which are a completely different kind of geographical dynamic in terms of how towns and cities work. But other areas were charging a lot more than £10. So what was settled upon was a manageable figure, which allowed us, tying in with the Audit Scotland report, to recover the costs of discretionary services, and that's largely what we sought to do. Your first point, Councillor McClymont, about the questions, I understand and acknowledge what you're saying, but that's what the executive of September last year agreed would be the questions that we would ask. My own personal view is, I think those residents that are within a residence parking zone have perhaps balanced up the benefits of having a residence parking permit zone in place. It's not perfect, it can be a wee bit disruptive for people in terms of visitors and maybe having workers doing work in their house. But I think they've balanced up that £10 to protect and retain a residence parking zone was seen as value for money. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Catherine.
Can I just come back on that? Yeah, sorry, if you don't mind. No, it was just. So, are you going to be sending out parking permits every 2 years with the dates on it, so that people who don't pay can park, basically?
Yes.
The cost of that's going to be quite expensive, isn't it? I mean, your postage is about £1 these days. Never mind the parking badge, etc.
Yeah, again, that's exactly what it is. So, last year, if you take last couple of years is not a good example. If you take an average 2 years out with COVID, it would have been costing us between 25 and maybe 50 grand over a two year period to do that, to send out, get an application form back in and send the permits back out. So this £5 per year, £10 every two years will bring in a level of income that is expected to cover the cost of doing that exercise, because at this moment in time we're doing that, and that's just a cost that we have been incurring for the last 10, 15 years. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm answering your question.
So when it goes to exec, are they going to be asked the same question? Because it seems a bit, you've already decided how much it's going to be. We don't seem to have a chance to say, well, we don't think there should be any cost. We're not getting asked that here either. If we were sitting at the Area Committee and said, well, actually, we think it should be free, and you should continue with it. Again,
all I'm doing today is obviously updating on the results of the consultation exercise. So the September Exec Committee last year, there was a paper put forward on this, and the discussion that ensued related to doing a consultation exercise. That's what we're doing. We've asked the questions, and we'll be feeding back to the Executive Committee to come to a view on whether the £10 charge is reinstated or whether it's not. Again, it's obviously not for myself to comment upon that at this moment in time. Certainly, if I can be upfront and honest, I think there's been a clear overwhelming reply. Over 30% of those that we contacted replied, and lost track of the figures at this moment in time. But the large majority agreed that they wish to pay the £5 per year charge. So certainly that will be getting noted, and it will be getting put to the Executive Committee to consider and to discuss in the same format. I fully expect the discussions that took place at Rutherglen Cambuslang Area Committee, East Kilbride Area Committee, which are clearly a bit more in depth, and even today will mirror what discussion takes place in early March. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Catherine, yep, you're silenced, I gather. Moving on then to Eileen, you're next, followed by Julia, then I think Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. It's just, I was a bit surprised about the Carluke coming into the equation, because I've been here long enough to know the background to Carluke, and basically Carluke was the council's doing. It wasn't that people asked for it or wanted it or anything else, but at the time when the renovation of the town, or whatever you would like to call it, was done, we took away people's back gardens, accesses and various different things like that, and it also then made it I don't know whether we had to compulsorily buy it or what happened, but the understanding was that they would be given dedicated parking spaces, and some people could actually pay for some lockups that was sitting in Rankin Street. So for me, it's a bit mixed up, because it's not really residential as such. Well, it is, and it's not because it's up above, but it was imposed on people because of actions of the council. But I've listened to everything that was said, and I've taken it into account, and that was all I wanted to say, that Carluke is actually different, I think, from everywhere else, simply because it was the council's actions that rendered it that it was required, and nothing else. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just come in here, I think Councillor Logan's point's more than valid. I think there's a number of, the reasons we introduced parking permits in East Kilbride differ somewhat slightly to what we did in Hamilton, and I think over the years in various other, Rutherglen is largely due to some of the pressures from the park and ride, and in Carluke, again, it's as Councillor Logan set out there. We're just trying to take a consistent approach. What we agreed in September, we would consult all those who had residence parking permit zones. So I think what's probably just highlight again that albeit it's a low number, a large proportion of those in Carluke, notwithstanding what Councillor Logan has said there, are willing to pay that. So it certainly would allow us to progress on that basis if the exec committee decide that is the case. Thanks, Chair.
Right. Thanks, Colin. Next is Juliet.
Thank you. I think actually a lot of what I might have said has been covered by Colin. So what I would say is that, just to reiterate, that this was initially discussed at the Road Safety Forum, which is a cross-party group. And that group was very clear that there shouldn't be a profit-making aspect to this, that the council don't actually make any money. Currently, the money for the resident parking permit zones comes out from the rest of the appropriate budget. So the £5 per year or £10 every 2 years was settled upon to minimise the admin costs. And there is very little fat. In fact, to be honest, I think that Colin may be able to speak to this more fully now, but time has elapsed since that decision was made, so there may be even less fat in that particular figure than there was in 2019 when it was discussed. Certainly, the Road Safety Forum did communicate with every single member to ask their views on what we were discussing, and to my recollection, there was one response, not from Clydesdale, with a request for more further resident parking permit zones in that area, something that is not currently possible because the budget does not allow. And of course, any resident parking permit zone only works when you have enforcement appropriate to that situation. Obviously, it was part of the budget process in 21-22, and it was agreed as a part of that budget process, and now we're looking at it again, and the executive will have their say. But certainly there is not a profit to the council to this. So any further outgoings would have to come out of other budgets if it did not have its own income.
Right. Okay. That's fine. Now, Lindsay, your hand's been up, been down, and it's down again. Do you want to come back?
Go with Eileen, it's fine.
Right, Eileen.
Thanks very much, Chair. You see, I can understand the Carluke part, not just because I live in Carluke, but I think as I've tried to explain to other people here today, Carluke was by necessity of council actions. The people couldn't do anything else but have to go into wee bays and things because their gardens, 3/4 in some cases of the gardens and everything was taken away. I don't understand basically why it lay with Julia Marr's committee's remit, because in the main, when you're speaking to people, and it did a petition that came through the council, basically what people want is to have what's the word, that they know that they should have, you know, a parking space at their area to accommodate themselves or their families. And never did it come up, you know, about road safety or anything else. I am assuming some of the areas, the one that I know was in a different town from mine, but it was because people parked here to go to the railway station or various different things and wouldn't even go into the park and ride. So I can understand all that. So it's it is very complicated. And it was just, it's hard to, you just get a full grip of what's everything that's getting said today. As I say, I still maintain that Carluke is different entirely, because if we decided it was a free-for-all for the folk there by our doing, the council's doing, then really they'd be into public car parks away for their houses and different stuff like that. But I'm not arguing with it. I'm going to go with the report and wait and see what happens. Thanks.
All right, Irene. Colin, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just purely the kind of first point, Councillor Logan, in terms of where that initial group sat under the road safety forum. The main trigger for it at the start was a lot to do with kind of parking problems in and around schools and safety problems that arose, and then eventually it morphed. And I'm fairly certain, and I'll maybe get my committees wrong here, but we took a report to a committee, and there was a need for a member officer group to look at it in a wee bit more detail, and it was felt that the Road Safety Forum, whilst not entirely road safety linked, was a group that had people on it who had an interest in that type of thing. And again, to be honest, despite it being a pretty challenging topic, I think actually every party member all contributed, and it was a group that reached consensus at the end, even in terms of the more challenging topic that we're talking about today. Clearly, given it's challenging, given we're still talking about it. Thanks, Chair.
Right, Lindsay, you do want to speak, and then followed by David.
Yeah, to be honest, like given the history that Eileen's been given and stuff like that, then I think that the recommendation from the committee should go forward is there is no change to the current. We think there shouldn't be any change to the current policy. So I think that we shouldn't take it away, or we shouldn't charge people in an area basis. Then if you're asking area committees what their opinion is, that's what I think should happen in Carluke.
Right. Okay, David.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Chair. Colin had mentioned the request to extend these residents' parking areas. The residents' parking area is a double-edged sword. Just thinking round about primary schools, I know there would be people who live there who would be over the moon if we gave them residents only parking because of the difficulties they have at certain times of the day. That would just push an existing problem into other streets. And I've been here long enough to remember people getting parking fines for parking in these bays and just off the Carluke High Street because they didn't have residents parking permits. So these things have got knock-on effects. So I would be very reluctant, Colin, honestly, to see the extension of any residents' parking areas. It would have to be looked at very, very carefully. I mean, I'm thinking Station Road in Carluke as well. That's been brought up before, asking for residents' parking permits there. And you go, when you first hear it, you think, oh, that sounds very reasonable. But it's laziness on the party drivers to use the car park that's there. So we have to be very careful what we do with this. And I would certainly be, if there was any extension to any residents' parking area, I think that would have to be looked at very carefully, and it would have to come to a political decision, because we would take, if you did it around primary schools, when the kickback came, it'd be elected members that got the kickback. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, if I can come in there, if that's okay. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Shearer. Again, just for the avoidance of any doubt, there are no current plans to extend any residence parking permit zones as a result of this paper today. This paper is purely updating yourself and obviously other area committees in relation to the council-wide survey that's been undertaken. Again, this is my own view as kind of head of service. I think it would be very difficult to charge in one area and not charge in another area for residence parking permit zones, and the approach taken for permits and residence parking zones, and the approach taken today is to kind of offer a degree of consistency. The only link, Councillor Shearer, that I was mentioning there in terms of expansion was we were unable to. There are some areas where we've had requests for residence parking permit zones, and the initial answer had been no. The position was we're not expanding, can't afford pressures, etc., etc. The work of the group that the Road Safety Forum, of the Road Safety Forum working group, identified that we did want to progress with expanding them where we can, and in turn that's where the charge came in from. So should we, for example, get a request specifically in for Station Road in Carluke, we've got a set of criteria that we'll look at. One of the reasons why we would resist doing a residence parking zone in any area is because of displacement and pushing vehicles just further into other areas and very quickly start chasing your tails, and you suddenly cover an entire town in residence parking zones, not necessarily as a result of the immediate problem that you're trying to solve, but mainly because as you're pushing people into other areas. So there are no plans to extend anything now. If we did do that, we would go through an appropriate level of consultation directly with members, and in turn, if we were to do that, we have to go through a traffic regulation order as well. And as you all know, there's various stages associated with that. So members would quite rightly get an opportunity to shape or to object. And bottom line is, if we weren't able to get a degree of consensus there, we're unlikely to progress to the next stage, which is the public consultation. But just to recap, the purpose of this paper today was to advise you of the recommendations, and the recommendation is to ask committee to discuss the context of the report, which clearly you are doing, and provide a recommendation for consideration by a future executive committee. Back over to you, Chair. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Just to my ignorance here, Lanark has not appeared on this at all, and is that for any particular reason or not?
It's purely to the fact that there is no residence parking permit zones in Lanark at this moment in time.
At all? Okay,
at all. So I'm trying to remember, there's clearly pressures in Lanark, and on the back of the wider town centres parking review, there's an exercise where we are going into, as soon as we possibly can, on the back of kind of recovering from COVID, we were going to be looking at kind of Lanark in a wee bit more detail, and Cambusllang's in there as well, and I think that exercise already started. So clearly, if as a result of any future exercise in Lanark, Carluke, Cambuslang, elsewhere, we don't have residence parking permit zones, and there's a need for them and there's merit for them, and members and officers are obviously feeling it's the right thing to do, if they're introduced, an executive committee agrees or otherwise on the 2nd of March that there's a £10 charge, that £10 charge would come in any new location as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Julia, you got your hand up again.
Yes, I'm perhaps overdoing it in terms of declaration, but I actually had noted that this was a report for noting and discussion. I am now noting that it's to provide a recommendation to future executive committee. Given my involvement with the previous paper, I'm happy to, having spoken to aspects of this report, recuse myself and allow the rest of the committee to make their decision on the recommendation. Chair, if you're able to allow me to go and call me back for the next item. So I'm not certain it's an absolute declaration of interest, but to be absolutely, to recuse myself from the area committee's decision on the recommendation aspect of the paper, I think I'd be happier to withdraw and come back to the next.
Well, item. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, Carol, will you deal with that? And Julia can I tell you what, though, before you go, Julia, as far as I can see, we are being expected to carry some form of recommendation forward. And we had Lindsay, who made a proposal seconded by Catherine. effectively. And I don't know whether that should form the basis of what we're taking forward or whether we need to vote on that and take it further.
Well, I'll leave that to you, Chair, but given there's a recommendation aspect to it, when I understood that it was for noting, fair enough, I was happy to stay. But, given my previous involvement, I'm happy to leave the Area Committee to make their decision without me.
Okay, well, stay nearby, and Carol will ring you when we finish.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Thank
Colin, just for the sake of correctness, carrying forward a recommendation is what you're looking for. Now, this recommendation is going to be parallel to recommendations in the other area committees as well, who will all have their own particular views. So what power is this going to have, this recommendation? It is purely for noting, really, the recommendation, isn't it?
Chair, again, if I can go in, obviously I need to be careful. I can't influence what recommendation you come up with, but I'd probably give an example of if a result of this exercise went to 4 area committees and they all rejected it, I would obviously be foolish to write a report that then proposes to the executive committee that would recommend it. Yeah. So what my plans are today is to obviously listen to yourselves and listen to Hamilton tomorrow and take cognizance of the 2 other area committees. And now, to be honest, the 2 other area committees is probably noted, and the minutes are probably available out there. So just to kind of put into context, one of the area committees noted the findings of the consultation and that they should be accepted, and we would continue to implement a £10 charge. That was one of the area committees proposed that, to accept the results of the consultation. One of the area committees discussed it at length, but noted that the executive committee should decide whether to accept it, and they never made a specific recommendation. And obviously, again, without getting into too much detail, Councillor Hamilton proposed, I think, Councillor Hamilton to reject it, reject the results of the consultation and charge across South Lanarkshire entirely, not just in Carluke. I think that's what you said, albeit I'll let Carol come in and do her job. I'll just be an engineer. I'll go back to do the other stuff. The weight of the area committee's recommendation is purely to then allow, again, myself as an officer to discuss with Alistair, who's obviously interim director with Michael's retirement, and then that will go forward as a paper. So at this moment in time, it's kind of balanced. Clearly, when you look at the results of the survey, I think our communities are responding in a set way in terms of the percentages that are wishing. 81% wish to pay. So it's for members to come to a view on whether they wish to uphold the results of that survey, or whether you wish to do something different. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay, Lindsay, do you want to come back first?
Yeah. Maybe I've got it wrong, Colin, but the questions in the survey was whether to pay or whether for the zones to be removed, was it not? So you're obviously going to say pay rather than remove, but what my proposal is that for it to stay the way it is, it's not to remove the zones full stop, it's to stay the way it is. So obviously if you say pay or remove, you're going to say, oh well, I would rather pay than remove the zones full stop.
Again, I totally understand that point, and it's a point that's been made several times. You guys are not necessarily here today with respect to talk about the questions that were asked. Clearly, that's a level of debate that we have to have. What's before you today is the results of the survey, and it's for yourselves to, for want of a better term, to accept the results of the survey, note the results of the survey, and provide a recommendation. Your recommendation could be to not accept the results of the survey and remain the status quo, i.e. we have residence parking zones and there is no charge. That is for yourselves to consider on the back of the survey. But again, just reiterating the facts here. 81% of people voted to pay for it. But again, Chair, I need to probably take a step back here because I'm probably maybe trying to give a formal word.
Colin, you're saying that as if people are actually volunteering to pay for it, but that's not. They maybe said that in the survey, but that's not like if you say to them, "Would you rather pay for it? Would you rather get it removed?" Or like I know that's by the by now, but you keep saying it as if people are like really, really up for paying for these things, but I think they would probably rather not pay for it than pay for it, but that's not what the survey said. So I'll go back. Like, there's no point in having this like a discussion further about it. But I'll go back to my motion that I would say that we stay with the status quo. The committee's recommendation is stay with the status quo, and people shouldn't pay, but they should have their permits. The conditions continued.
Okay, well, look, I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. Colin, I'm sorry. I think probably it's sensible if you let us just have a quick run around. If you can keep yourself available, and we will just have a discussion first amongst ourselves, if that's all right. I think it's appropriate. And then we will, I think by the sound of it, we may have two camps, in which case we'll have to have a quick vote on what we are proposing, if you like, as this committee, and then come back to you. Is that all right?
Chair, if you wish me to leave, I can. Carla, take it that's okay. Again, I'm certainly...
Sorry, Colin. Yeah, it is fine if members wish you to leave. What I would say is it might be useful if Colin is there to answer any further questions that members might have.
Okay, I don't have a problem. I just bearing in mind the sensitivity of our discussions. But if everyone else is happy that you should remain in the background and then be available for questions, then I'm happy to leave it at that.
So, Chair, the meeting has been live streamed and it's in public anyway. So
right, so we are still live streamed at the moment with this discussion, I presume.
Yes, it's a public meeting. We can't stop that.
Okay, right. Okay. First of all, I've got Colin McGavigan with his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. The charges that South Lanarkshire charge for parking permits are ridiculously low when you compare it to anybody else. And if we stop charging people who run cars and have the benefit of parking near their homes, the rest of the council and every other constituent in South Lanarkshire is subsidising those parking permits. So an administrative charge of £10 for 2 years seems to make sense if we're not having the sensible thing of actually charging for a parking space near your home. That I don't think that it's unreasonable to accept the proposals that are in the paper. I can understand Lindsay's point of view, and Carluke is historically different from elsewhere, but times move on and people will probably, the same people that lost their gardens may no longer own the properties. But I do think that there does need to be an administrative charge for this, and it possibly would prevent people just applying for 4 permits for their home when there's no charge. But if there was even though it's just a nominal fee, it may discourage people from just applying for every vehicle that they have. That personally, I think we should note the paper and accept the recommendations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Now, Carol, you got your hand up.
Apologies, Chair, I just hadn't taken it back down.
Okay. Right, I just want to throw the floor open to anyone who specifically wants to make a point in one direction or the other. We've had one side which is simply saying that our recommendation would be to, as I understand Lindsay's remark, is to retain the parking zones but continue to make no charge for them. That seems to be seconded by Catherine, and that's a fairly clear view. So what I now need to do is, if anyone has got any points and thoughts that they have and wish to make in either direction, now's your chance to do it.
But Colin's just counter-motioned that, haven't you, Colin?
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to have support in one direction or another.
Well, you need to ask if somebody's going to support Colin.
No. I will support, as chair, I will support what Colin's motion is.
Sorry, Chair, that's just the paper.
Yeah, that's all. What we're doing is a recommendation, and we are going to sit.
But it's either the paper or the motion, is it not? Because I've not put forward anything other than what's the recommendation on the
Okay,
paper?
yeah, I've explained it badly. It's the paper or it's the amendment as I described it, what Lindsay has put forward and seconded by Catherine. Colin, you've got a point.
Sorry, Chair, just for point of clarity, the paper purposely does not provide a recommendation. So the committee is asked to note and discuss the contents of the report, and clearly we're doing that well. And then the group has to provide a recommendation for consideration by committee. So we, to be clear, I am not, because it's not my gift, to put forward to this area committee a recommendation to reintroduce a £10 permit charge. That's not what we're doing. So you remember this went to September Exec Committee. There was a bit of a debate that we had to consult with our communities, and I think it's actually Councillor Alec Allison at the time wanted this level of debate to come via the area committees and for a bit of a view. So again, if I can be bold, I think Councillor Hamilton's clearly made a clear statement. The motion is to retain the status quo, have residence parking permit zones and not pay a charge for those parking permits. There's potentially an alternative motion there, or an alternative or amendment if I get my terminology right, but I don't think that's came forward explicitly yet.
No, I think we've got to the point where I just simply think we need to decide whether, as Colin points out, we're happy that what is being proposed goes forward, or that we support Lindsay's view seconded by Catherine, and therefore, in a sense, it's a form of vote on a motion. So I propose that we have we have two votes. One is for the report to go forward as it is, and the other is the amendment proposed by Lindsay. Is that not the best way forward?
Sorry, Chair. Colin's just pointed out that that's not right. We do actually have two motions. I think Carol needs to step in and just tidy everything up. Thanks,
okay.
Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the way I can see it is we have the motion put forward by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McClymont, that we keep the status quo, we keep the residence parking zones, and we don't have a charge. Councillor McGavigan, are you putting forward as an amendment that we accept the recommendations of the report, and that we accept the charge for the residence parking zones?
Yes.
Okay.
But Carol, sorry to intervene here, but as Colin Park pointed out, there are no recommendations on the report.
No, we're noting we're basically noting the content of the survey. So we're noting the content of the report, and we are accepting the proposals from the report, which is that the £10 charge comes into play over a 2-year period.
Yeah, I mean, can I just remind you, I'll read out the very words. Note and discuss the contents of this report and provide a recommendation for consideration by a future executive committee. That seems fairly clear, that we are only, if you like, as an area committee making a recommendation, all right? So if we've got 2 points, then surely we should be able to decide which of those two by majority vote is our recommendation. Is that impossible? No. Carol, I think that unless anyone else has got any specific views on that, would you like to just read out what we will be going round and voting either for or against?
Okay, so the motion would be proposed by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McClymont, that we keep the status quo, we keep the residence parking zones, and we don't have a charge for those. Okay. By way of amendment is Councillor McGavigan, seconded by yourself, that we accept the findings of the survey, and that we accept a £10 charge over the 2 years for the residence parking permits.
Okay, would you just like to then go through, please, and take the vote?
Okay, thank you. So the motion is for the status quo and no charge, and the amendment is that we accept the findings and we accept the £10 charge. So Councillor Greenshields?
Amendment.
Councillor Hamilton?
Motion.
Councillor Horsham?
Amendment.
Councillor Lockhart?
Amendment.
Councillor Logan?
Motion.
Councillor McClyman?
Motion.
Councillor McGavigan?
Amendment.
Councillor Shearer?
Amendment.
Okay, Chair, so we have 3 for the motion and 5 for the amendment.
Thank you, Carol. Right, well, there you are, Colin. That's what we have voted, so you have that answer now from us, okay?
Chair, I'll just give everybody on the committee a degree of comfort that I'll try and capture a degree of this debate in the report that goes to the Executive Committee. Maybe not every word, but I'll certainly talk about what the discussion focused on. And again, everyone that's on the Executive Committee will have an opportunity to have a further discussion on the 2nd of March again. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we have now got nothing else on this particular section. Colin, thank you very much for all that, and it certainly sparked a good debate, and there's plenty of feeling about it. So you can now retire as well if you'd like to, and we'll move on to the final part of the meeting, which is the community grant applications. Thank you for coming.
Chair, I'll just invite Councillor Marsh back.
Yes.
Just going to say that, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Marsh, can you confirm that you're now back with us?
Yes, I'm here, Carol.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Right, we'll move on to the last bit, which is there's very little of it, but I suspect it might raise a few points, and I'd like to make also have a small discussion at the end of it about the grants in general. However, what we have in front of us is only 4 grants here, and I therefore actually, because each one is slightly different, I propose to deal with them individually, and people can express their views, if you like, on each one, because we have to determine what is going to be awarded for each of these grants. The first one is Come Paint With Us at Blackwood. It's a simple proposal for materials. The amount requested was £300, but the amount potentially to be awarded is £250. And I would just make the point in the background now that this is the last opportunity for grants to be awarded, and there is a very substantial amount of money left, which is so far unawarded. And bearing in mind past discussions where we have decided to stick with the exact rules, or where we have possibly argued to, because they're de minimis, the amounts we're discussing, to award the full amount, I would like to make each determination where appropriate with that in the background of your thinking. So the first one is this one, Come Paint With Us. Thank you. Has anyone got any thoughts? I suggested, I think Mark and we discussed this at the pre-meeting and felt that they should simply be given the £300, but that is obviously up for discussion. Catherine, you have a hand up.
Chair, that's not what you're recommending. The recommendation you're saying here is £250. So if you had that discussion, it's not reflected in the report. And I would suggest, given the money that we've got left, that we do give them the £300.
Well, that's sort of what we talked about. But if you have a view on that, anyone else? Okay, I've got Well, Carol, you come in first and then Colin.
Yeah, Chair, it was just to confirm that the wording of the community grants report was changed following on from the discussion at the previous area committee. So it was agreed that we would put in the eligible amount, and as officers we still need to put in a recommendation within that report.
But Carol, if the chair's saying he's recommended 300 along with Mark, surely that's what should go in front of us, is it not?
At the agenda meeting, it was agreed that that the community grants would be discussed on an individual basis, Councillor McClymont.
Okay, first of all, Mark and then Eileen.
Just to sort of clear it up for Catherine, what we discussed at the pre-agenda meeting was that there might be this conversation about increasing it and going with previous discussions where we sort of stuck by the rules and everything like that. I think there's £28,000 left in the account. There's only 4 grants, and that was what the discussion was around. That there might be this scenario where it would be awarded them the full amount or not. Just to sort of clear up that there was no decision made at that meeting, Catherine.
Yeah, I can confirm that, definitely. Eileen, do you want to come in and then Catherine can come back?
All right. Well, this is the kind of thing that I envisaged would happen when we decided. I didn't agree to stick things right away up the last time and put huge amounts on, because I think Mark Horsham has kind of explained that you two don't have any powers to sit anywhere and make any decisions basically behind the closed door.
We know that.
So I think the wording that you said was probably wrong. So if you wish to make it 300, given we've given other folk higher amounts, or whatever it is that it should be, then fine. But I think we need to be crystal clear that you only chair the meeting and Councillor Horsham would only be stepping in if you weren't here. So, but given we did it before, if you're saying, well, you think now at a public forum that it should go up, well, fine. But I lost the last time, so I'm accepting I lost the last time. And you can't have, people last month getting X and this month that we're not doing it.
Yeah, we made that point too at our meeting, which is why this is open for discussion. No decisions were made. It was a proposal. Okay, next was Catherine coming back, and then David.
No, it was just to say, I think Mark maybe got it wrong because we did do it the last time. So
that's what I'm saying.
So, we did do it the last time. So I'm saying that's why I'm saying 300. I'm a bit confused, to be honest. But anyway, surely we can organise this.
Okay, David.
Thanks, Chair. I recognise that there's quite a lot of money left in the pot, and that's maybe to do with the fact that we're still coming through COVID and we're not quite through it now. Like Eileen, I am very, very reluctant to go away from our guidelines because it leaves us open to an organisation who applied a couple of months ago and got what the recommendations suggest on, if we'd waited a couple of months, we'd have got the full amount because there's money lying vacant there and they want to spend it. I think that sets a very dangerous precedent. There's either rules or there isn't, and if there is rules, we should stick to the rules. It keeps everybody right. Everybody knows what's happening before the money is allocated. I think it's dangerous and sets a bad precedent to deviate from the rules just because there happens to be spare cash lying available. And remember, we've got a Jubilee coming up. There may well be other community groups out there wishing to apply for grants for the Jubilee, and we might be able to use that money that's available, or it'll come back to us in Clydesdale and we could use it then. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, David. A very fair point. So, and Colin, you want to come back?
Can you just take a vote on it, Chair, and we can move forward?
Yeah, it's dead easy to take a vote on it. So the motion I suppose let's avoid a vote. Are we agreed that we stick to the rules that we've always gone by? Then we can deal with the last item in the same way.
No, Chair, you didn't abide by those rules last time. That's the point I was trying to make.
Well, in that case, we're reaping the whirlwind that Eileen is talking about. I'm not sure where we are. I mean, the amount we're talking about is de minimis, but I feel that this, for the purposes of if you like, the fact that this is obviously a public meeting and we need to be clear about what our rules are, and we need to be clear about what we have or are intending to do, and bearing in mind this is the last meeting that we have for this particular period. I think that we are on probably safer ground, despite what I said, that we continue operating the way we have in the past. Has anyone got any major disagreements with that? Colin has.
In the past, are you saying that in the past we gave them more money, or in the past there were guidelines that we adhered to? Because we are a committee, the decision is by us. There are only recommendations that are coming forward, and I know it's only arguing over £50 or discussing over £50, but £50 to come paint with us could make a reasonable difference in that's the amount of money they need. And if someone comes forward from that, I can't actually imagine someone coming forward, an organisation, and saying, we got £250 last time, and had we applied 2 months later when we no longer needed the money, we'd have got £500. So I think just a simple vote as yea or nay, and we can move forward.
All right. Okay, right. So if we need a vote, then we need a proposal, someone who wants to make it up to the full amount of 300. Who will propose that?
No, Chair.
I'll propose that, Chair.
Chair, because I sort of started, I want to say that the last time out, it wasn't just £50. We were doubling up to nearly £1,000, £500 for groups that, were asking for that amount of money. I don't think, personally, this time we can step back and say now, I think everybody, whatever they ask for, should be able to get it, because we did it before. And it doesn't matter whether you did it, in my view anyway, I think we did it before, and that's what I tried to say, then I would be angry if it was my wee club, whether it's £50 or £500. There's people sitting £500 extra or more than what's on their papers. So I don't think that this time round we can look at it, and I think it's something that should be fully looked at, not today, but at a future council. The rules and the regulations. I think it would be grossly unfair to do it 1 month and then the rest month we don't do it.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got a proposal from Lindsay that we grant the full amount. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Right, Catherine has a seconder. So what we need to do then, Carol, is just go through. The motion is that we grant the full amount, and the alternative is that we stick to the original amount. And David Shearer has a point.
Chair, I'm not having a go at any of these groups or any things that they do. Very valid groups, but honestly, I think we should stick to the recommendations that are in the paper and not vary from that, because it gets us into all sorts of mess. We did it before. Eileen rightly said we've done it before.
David, we've lost you.
Discussed. Hello?
Yeah, we lost you. We lost you. Yeah.
Right. I just think it's stick to the rules, and if you want to vary the rules, that's a discussion for somewhere else, and we can come back. But I think we get into all sorts of mess just granting things willy-nilly. I don't like that. I much prefer that we stick to the rules.
Well, look, we've got two opposing points of view, so I think it's pretty simple. I think we can go round forever on this one. I know it's not the amount we're talking about, it's the principle.
Yeah.
Catherine, go on then.
I think if you look at the rules, which were accompanied with the paperwork, materials variable. We're not breaking the rules.
Carol?
Yeah, Chair, I would highlight that is exactly correct. Could I just say though, these are only guidelines. It is variable. It does say further down the documentation that we generally go for 60%. In this case, actually, because it was such a little amount that was asked for, they have got more already in the recommendation than they normally would.
Right, I think we can, what I'd like to do, if everyone is agreed, we have two clear views on this, and I would still propose that we go with a majority vote on this, because otherwise we are going to go around in circles, and as it's not an absolute rule, I think it's fair to take it to a majority vote.
Yeah.
So, Carol, can you do that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so we have Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McClyman, proposing that the Come Paint With Me is awarded £300. And we have Councillor Shearer. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Shearer's amendment?
Since I was against it before, I'll go with David Shearer.
Okay, so we have Councillor Shearer, seconded by Councillor Logan, proposing that the group be awarded £250. Okay, so Councillor Greenshields?
He's just left.
He has just left us. Okay, so Councillor, bit of background noise here. Councillor Hamilton?
Motion? Was that right?
Motion is 300 and amendment is 250.
Motion.
Motion.
Councillor Lockhart?
Motion.
Okay, Councillor Logan?
Amendment.
Councillor McClyman?
Motion.
Councillor McGavigan?
Motion.
Councillor Marsh?
Amendment.
Councillor Shearer?
Amendment.
Okay, and Councillor Greenshields hasn't rejoined us, so we have 4 for the motion, which is the £300, and 3 for the amendment, which is 250.
Right, thank you very much, everybody. Sorry to force that on you. I think we've got to look at another 2 on that basis, 2 of which are simple. And therefore, I propose that we look at the second applicant, which is 3 values women, which is the eligible amount requested, and the recommendation is 148. So we have no problem there, because I believe it fits within the guidelines, Carol, anyway. So can I just have everyone's views on that?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Good, thank you very much. Then we move on to the third one, which I suspect again might be a problem, although I think again it is within the actual guidelines that the amount requested was 500 and the recommendation was 300. So I throw this open again to what people's views might be on this. Carol, can you just tell me the amount that they applied for and the amount they were granted? Was the amount that they were granted because what they applied for was out with, if you like, what would normally be granted?
Chair, no, it's no. They applied for £500 for equipment, which is eligible, and we have applied the variable 60% grant award, Chair.
Okay, right. I open the floor, or do I need to?
No.
I propose that it's put up to 500.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Are we agreed based on the last vote?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Well, don't
Okay,
agree, but go ahead.
Right, okay, so that's fine. Thank
I
you.
don't agree either.
Neither do I.
No, we have Councillor
Do we want to
Logan,
put it to a vote?
Mars. Okay, and Shearer don't agree, but there we are. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm sorry to have done that, but in regard to that, Carol, I would like to have a small discussion after the meeting, briefly, on the subject that we discussed, and Mark Horsham knows what I'm talking about, which is the remainder of these funds. I don't believe it's got anything to do with the current meeting and proposals and grants. Therefore, if you're all happy, essentially, I'd like to close this meeting. Would that be okay, Carol?
Chair,
Still got a
just
brain.
do the Renstrue Women's Rural Institute grant to do.
Sorry?
We still have got the Renstrue Women's Rural Institute grant.
Where's that? Is that at the bottom?
That's over the page 22.
Can't see it in my notes.
So we have the application is for £250 for.
Oh yes, sorry, I got it. Yeah, my fault. Yeah, I sorry, I took that because there's no nothing contentious in that one. Are we all agreed with that one? Thank you very much indeed. Right. If you don't mind staying, Carol, is that all right? We can close the recording now because I think this is for internal discussion only.
Yeah, Chair, I can just confirm that you have no other urgent business.
Anyone got any other urgent business? Thank you very much.
Chair, is this about the remaining money? Should it not be continued publicly then?
I don't think so.
If we're going to make a recommendation, how can we do it out with a proper meeting?
I'm not sure we were making any recommendations. I wanted to discuss our thinking on it, if you like, going forward. And I think,
Chair, I object then because there's going to be a new council in May elected, and if there's to be any discussions on our future going forward or whatever, then it's up to the new councillors elected for the Clydesdale area, whoever they happen to be, to make such recommendations, to set out the rules. And I don't think that I want to be part of trying to, forecast who's going to get in, who's not going to get in, what would they do, or try and make recommendations that they might not like in the first place.
Well, okay, let's, Lindsay, then, what have you got to say?
I also don't feel comfortable making a declaration in public that we're now going into private to discuss about money. I don't think that should be the case. If we're an open and transparent council, we should be having discussion in public. But I also agree with Eileen that this is, all of us could end up not getting back in. So if it's about the future area committees, then I don't think we should be having that discussion.
Okay, well, in which case, then we will just not have the discussion if that's what people feel, and we can just end the meeting where we are. I don't mind at all. I just felt that it was something that was appropriate at the end of the session, 5 years later, based on past experience, and where we are at the moment, because there have been lots of things that have been very different, especially this last 2 years. As a result of COVID, there's been very few applications and very few things which has resulted in this surplus. So if you're happy that we actually conclude with the fact that we are where we are and that there is a surplus, which is substantial, and that we will then be leaving that, if you like, to the next session, the next group of people who come in to make any decisions on that. Is that what are we agreed?
One other point is as well, Chair, as far as I understand, be it right, be it wrong, be it different, there is plans afoot to change the local area committees anyway, where there might be planning coming back or various different stuff. So I just think that really, if this was maybe 2 years to go, you could say that's fine. But given that it's May, no, I think you're right. Just close our meeting and let it be.
Right. Well, I mean, the very point you raised just shows what an open door this is and how wide-ranging this could get. So I think that you're right to make the point, and as a result of which, I think in that case, if we're all agreed that is now the end of the meeting, if there's no other urgent business, are we agreed?
Yep, agreed.
Okay, well, in that case, thank you for your attendance. And that is now the last meeting of this particular session. So thank you all very much for all of your attendances.
Yep.
And
a vote of thanks to you for the past, 5 years.
yes, it doesn't go off quickly, does it?
It does so.
Anyway, look, thank you all very much. And can I ask you, Carol, then to stop the recording?